Hello, amateurs. Welcome back to our Six Nations series, and I've got Slem with me again this morning. Slem, how you doing, sir?
Yeah, good, thanks. You all right?
Good to see you. And in this game, we're going to have a nice deep dive into the Ireland-England game from yesterday. Slem, why don't you kick it off maybe with just some sort of general thoughts about how the game went overall?
I think general thoughts is, I guess, the result is probably turned out what we called, right? Just in terms of the scoreline, 5-point victory for Ireland. You might have said, "Oh, that's a decent effort by England," and probably, but there's a lot more to it than that. I think there's a few different narratives, and actually, it's a game of two halves in some ways, classic stuff. But I mean, you want to win the first game, and I think for Ireland not to win their first home game would have been a big deal. But the stuff that they'll probably both be happy and both frustrated in the same way. England would be gutted not to win, undoubtedly, but they did really well first half. They played some really good stuff, both in attack and defence. And it's becoming a bit of a story, actually, if you look at it, that second half performances haven't been quite as good. So that's the general narrative, is ultimately England started well, did some good stuff, had a clear plan in attack and defence, which worked. But Ireland were patient and they stuck at it, and they weren't quite clicking, but that was partly because of England's defence, I think. I think you've got to give them some credit. They kind of did a good job of nullifying their threats. And then second half, they just carried on and they started to kind of assert their dominance. One or two calls, one in particular, a point in the game which just turned the momentum a bit, which can happen. Ireland were the better team, and you could tell by the end they had double the caps, because it just got that sense that these guys have played big games and won them, and you got a sense maybe that England hadn't quite.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go back to the pre-game though, because something happened after the anthems, and the stadium singer sang Fields of Athenry after the anthems, and the players were kind of waiting around on the pitch for the singer to finish, which felt a bit strange to me. I'm not sure I've noticed that before at Ireland games. Was that new?
I went to the loo then, so I actually missed that. So I was a bit surprised that the game hadn't started, so that explains it. I was like, I've got to go. I've had 2 Guinness Zeros already. And it's like,
yeah,
I was at home. So
okay, anybody in the comments, let me know. Is that normal? Because I don't remember hearing it before, and certainly not the players just standing around on the field listening to the Fields of Athenry being sung by.
So were they in position to start, or were they still in line?
No, ready to start. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Let's get into this game. And as you said, England did actually start really well. They won the kickoff. They kicked off and won the ball back immediately, which is always such a nice momentum shift, I think, early in the game. If you can do that, then it really, you just feel like, right, we're into this now. We're into it.
And I thought they were massive. Massive. And I think people don't underestimate that, actually. They know that. I mean, look at what happened after we scored. Bennell knocked it on. And that suddenly were under pressure for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
so they are huge, and that did get some nice momentum, which England needed, I think, to start the game well. It was all the chat before was about England starting well, which they did. So nice little kick up the middle. You use your strength. So that worked really well.
Yeah, and they went to that was Freddie Stewart that won that one back, and they tried to use him several times. Let's talk about the aerial game overall at this point as well, actually, because I thought it was actually a very, very close contest. I thought James Lowe did pretty well against Tommy Freeman, who's very good in the air. I thought people like, Hugo Keenan's always good in the air, so he was great. But even like later, Smith went to fullback. He did pretty well in the air as well. So I thought the aerial game was fascinating.
It was interesting because there was one or two that actually hit the ground, which is quite rare. Around Merley as well, which we'll come on to, but I think who played well in lots of parts, but there's one or two that bounced. And Ireland, I mean, in football, like the second ball, they call it, as it comes down, Ireland won a lot of those. And actually, sometimes it was just the bounce of the ball. It did just go to them. Maybe I'm being unfair there. Maybe it's just tactic of how they play, but they did get those bounces. And fair play to them. They got onto some of those balls, and that really helped them, I think.
Yeah, again, those breaks in the game, those can be quite big momentum shifts as well. If it looks like it should be your ball and suddenly you don't get it, it can change things. But England got the first try through Merley, try on debut. And there was some good play here, actually. Ollie Lawrence was really strong through the middle with a good carry. And then Slade just recognised the opportunity, nicked it in behind, and Merley was onto it in a flash and scored. Any other bits you want to pick out from that try? So
I just think in general, what was clear is that it can be a bit of a war of attrition there, can't it? In the kind of hitting the forwards up, and it was clear they didn't do that. They played wide first, so they were happy to get to the edge and then play back, and it really works. And it's such a nice thing. They didn't quite get to do that in the second half, which was really disappointing. I think England will be really disappointed that they almost went, because they defended so well, they went into almost defensive mode, and they just didn't attack enough. But at the start of the game, they really did. And I think the big bonus is that Lawrence and Slade played well. Like, Lawrence, arguably England's best player in terms of impact. I mean, geez, some of his hits, which one of the tries at the end was completely him and his play. So you've got a centre partnership, which we've been trying. We talked about it, didn't we, on Friday? England have been wanting to get that to work, and for me, it really did. Which is ironic because Marcus Smith received a little bit of criticism for not getting them to play, and they did, and he's still getting criticism. So pick one. It's like, but yeah, and that ball, because Slade obviously is a real football and played a fair bit of rugby at 10, that ball behind, if done well, is almost impossible to defend, because that far over, getting technical, the fullback, if he's closing the gap, the blind toe wing is not going to be in that gap. And so the final man's trying to stay back, but the second he goes close to the gap, if you're man on, then that's the play. And so, yeah, it was a brilliant bit of play and just really good attacking stuff.
Yeah, and there was no defensive errors there, was there? Keenan had to come up because if he passed him early, he had to be there to make the tackle. And the ball just bounced through his I think it either went through his legs or under his foot. So there's really
no defensive error in the sense of no individual has made a mistake. You could, if you're being really pernickety, you could say, well, they should have had one more player there. But it was quick ball. And I think you're not going to, no, I wouldn't say there's any real mistakes. There was just really good play. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, so that was a try. And then Ben Earl dropped the kickoff, which has been a plague of England for, through the autumn and last year as well. I just think it's such a massive momentum shift. And that got Ireland actually their first toehold into the game. And they looked pretty good once they got into England's territory with their attack, looking quite flowing, quite heavy carries as well. So it was really disappointing from England's side, though. And it was really interesting. I mean, Ireland, when they get into their rhythm, Gibson Park was just fantastic, I thought. And I think really excellent. But England defended well. Like they were stopping them. And I think what was interesting is they were able, the plan of picking two Curries, like three back rowers who can kind of jackal up and get on the ball, really did work. Like they really did do it. And Itoje was in there, Martin, it was, and the nice thing about the defence, the criticism that England had the defence is the blitz at all costs sort of attitude. They really didn't do. They did when the decision-making around that seemed much better. Like a couple of times, the backs and Prendergast did some lovely wide passes. They did go wide, and they didn't have massive numbers, but they softened and they old school drifted. They didn't quite do that, but it was kind of, they moved to the side, which was nice to see. And actually there's a couple of times, one in particular I can think, where they made 15, 20 metres and they got the turnover. So they let them have the space and then they kind of isolated them. So that was really, really good to see. But I mean, Ireland, do you know what? They were patient, as we said before. They just kept the ball. They didn't panic. The fact is these games are won often. It's in the last 20 minutes. And so us continuing to say, well, England did well in the first half, didn't they? And I was kind of like really pleased for them that they did, because it's sense that they've moved on a bit from November, and maybe they did too. They kind of are really happy, and you're like, actually, it's at the end that you got to kind of win it. But I think in the first half, Ireland kept pressing and kept defending, and it was pretty much level. Yeah, I agree. Now, you mentioned there was some criticism of Marcus Smith there after the game, but also Prendergast has actually attracted a little bit of criticism as well. Now, I didn't really see that when I was watching the game. There was a couple of kicks that were maybe a little bit short, one pass that didn't go to hand, but overall, I thought he had a pretty solid game. What was your thoughts about his performance? Yeah, I mean, he wasn't error-free, but geez, he's playing fly off. He's 21. You play 10, you make mistakes because you make the most decisions. So I thought he was pretty. I mean, one or two of the passes that he made were just lovely to watch. It's kind of like to stand flat near the line and throw a 20-meter pass out is so much more difficult than it appears to do, because there's so much going on. So no, I mean, he wasn't faultless, and he might have made one or two calls that weren't correct, and he missed one kick, which you could argue he should have got. But do you know what? He's 20. I think if that's me and you're 21, you're starting your first game, to have played like that, I'd be pretty bloody happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And actually, we'll talk about this later in the game, but he actually had that long-range penalty to get Ireland into the lead. And that was a real clutch kick, I think. And for him to nail that one, I thought showed real confidence.
Was. Yeah.
What do you make of the disallowed try, Kelleher try? Any thoughts on that apart from yes, it should have been disallowed?
Well, it's that classic. I think it's really good if people haven't watched that much rugby or don't necessarily understand all the rules, and it's frankly pretty complicated at times. That's a great example of that was easy. Why was there a gap there? Well, there's a gap there because the guy had hold of his leg. Now, it's always difficult to know, though, isn't it? Whether you go, well, if he let go of him, would he have been there? I think he probably would. Would he have stopped him is another question. But it was such a clear hold that you got it. Yeah, but it's like you see that gap, and that never happens, does it? Now at the top level, that kind of like in the red zone, if you call it American football style, the last 10 meters. It's pretty. People are there, so it was a bit odd. I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, that was exactly my impression. When he went through and scored, it just looked wrong. And you can't pick it out on the first viewing because it wasn't that obvious, but it just looked wrong. And obviously,
it's totally that. Yeah, totally that.
Yeah. So I thought England were winning the kicking battle. I think England kicked with greater length and greater accuracy and really dominating the territory. I
think there is a point. England in the first half, they did play. They were winning the kicking game, so they were defensively strong. Their attack was pretty good, not revolutionary, but pretty good. And they were putting the ball. Ireland were having the ball, but it was in their half. And international rugby, more than I think maybe Premiership, is so about position as well as possession. You know, if you can put people under pressure, it isn't always an advantage to have the ball. So, the conditions were pretty good. So, probably do want the ball. But if you got it in your own half or in your own 22, it can be tricky. And you can you're trying to get turnovers, you're trying to get penalties. So, no, I think England would have been really happy with the way they played and put them under pressure with their kicking game.
Yeah, and then the defence, we mentioned this a few times, it was almost frantic at times, in a good way, though, I'd say. When they had opportunity to go up and put pressure on Ireland, they absolutely did. Caught Ireland behind the gain line quite a lot of times, spragged them, and it led to turnovers as well. So at this point in the game, I was pretty happy with how things were going, to be honest.
Bloody delighted. I couldn't believe, it was exactly how you would hope. You know, there was real hope in and you know what? It's that classic thing, isn't it? Like we talk so much about, and I told you did before, and we mentioned on Friday, it being about winning. But if you focus on winning, you're probably not going to win. So it's like that classic focus on the process, not the outcome. And it felt to me that in that sense, actually Ireland would have been okay because they were still playing their game, but England were nullifying it and they were playing their game. And the things that maybe they were criticised for previously, defensively and in attack, they were figuring out. So I think you're like, okay, focus on the process, not the outcome. Focus on each phase of play. Focus on people doing things right. And they were. So, yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, and the one thing, though, that England did do, which has also been a plague a little bit in the past as well, was too many penalties. So when Ireland were piling on the pressure in good territorial position, England was still giving away a lot of penalties. And that led to the Marcus Smith yellow card, which I don't think anybody can really disagree with. And then eventually the dam burst with Lowe getting the better of Mitchell on the outside, which led to the brilliant step from Gibson Park around Freddie Stewart and the Irish try. Any thoughts on the Ireland try there?
I think, probably for Ireland, you're looking for mismatches, and Mitchell against Lowe is one. Like, no criticism really of Mitchell, but like you give somebody that much space one-on-one, that player should beat that player. Like, I don't know what the system is for the 9 to be there, but it doesn't matter. The fact is he did really well. I mean, Stewart will be disappointed to have not made that tackle, because there's talk during the game about, Stewart's not that quick, and so maybe he was worried. You shouldn't be worried with Gibson Park. He's not that fast. So just give him one side. And Stewart is quick enough. So I think you just, it can happen at fullback. It's a really isolated position, but I think he'd be disappointed that he didn't just show him one side, then close the space and just make the tackle. So that is disappointing. And actually, the other try when Bundy Aki scored, Marcus Smith made it. And you know what? You're not stopping Bundyaki from that far. Marcus Smith completely committed to that tackle. He's not very big, and he's ran over the top of him. And even then, the finish was world class. I mean, the way he managed to get that ball down. But I think that Ireland manipulated it, got to that space, and it was a great try. But again, there's probably a couple of things, as well as England defended. They'll be disappointed. But Mitchell went to make, if any young people watching, he went to make that tackle. Geez, he gave it his absolute best shot. It's just a bit of a mismatch.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched it back again this morning, and the only thing I would add to that is I think if you're Mitchell, you just don't get beaten on the outside. If you're going to get beaten back on the inside. So I think looking at it again, that's the only thing, because he had Lawrence and Tom Curry directly inside him and not that much Irish support, actually. So if he could have got him to step back in, I think that would have been the better option. But again, it's easier said than done.
The problem with that is that he had so much space. If you offer him the inside, you probably aren't running that hard. He's going to run over the top of you. When I saw it, you've got two choices. You either hold off and you do exactly that. You try which he kind of did, or you go hard and lower him, which he almost did. He got there, he slowed down, so he didn't get stepped. And I think if he got stepped, I'm not sure those guys would have got to him. I don't know. I can't remember how close they were, but
they were pretty close. They were pretty close.
Were they? Okay.
Yeah.
You would say that because that was what you thought. But no, I'm sure you're right. And so he didn't quite go hard to cut him down. And at one point, I thought, he's got him. I thought he had him.
Yeah.
He was just a bit upright. So, if you look at him, he was actually east to sugar. If he was a touch lower and go hard, he would have stopped him, I think. Look at me.
Well, that was a real break in the game, though, I think, because as we said, it was up to that point, England, Ireland had periods of possession and were playing well, but England were dealing with it. And then when they did have chances to attack, were looking fairly dangerous as well. But it really felt like that one missed tackle was a big moment in the game.
And you know what? There are always these moments, aren't there? There's always these. You look at it afterwards. Sometimes you look at it in the moment. You go, that's a big moment. And there's moments all the time. And I think I said there's that nullification we talked about of people kind of cancelling each other out, and then you have those moments, and it's who capitalises and who gets it done, and that's actually where Ireland were better. Is actually in those moments they did get it done.
And early in the second half there was another big moment, and this was a kind of a nothing kick. I think it was from Prendergast, but Murley just got it all wrong. I don't know if he lost it in the wind or whatever. Ended up knocking it back into his own in-goal area, and therefore had to run out. And that led to a period of quite a lot of Irish pressure. And Murley, who I thought had some real good moments in the game, he just wasn't quite the same player after that. It looked like his nerve had gone a little bit.
So he made two mistakes in the in-goal area, didn't he? So the second one is worse in a way, because all he had to do, that's just game knowledge, put the ball down. So I don't know why he didn't. So that one is a drop out from the sticks, right? If it goes over. So I think that one is a bad mistake. The one before, I give him the slight benefit of the doubt, because it looked when you're watching that it was going to go out. It bounced and rolled. He obviously didn't think that. And we've seen it happen a few times where people dive in and score, when that happens. And so he would have felt that person really close to him, and in that split second have to make that decision. So I totally see why he did. It was a mistake for sure, but it wasn't a game knowledge mistake. The second one's almost unforgivable for a player for a professional rugby player. Just know the rules. Put it down. I don't know. I'd love to know what he was thinking. He's a great player, and I'm really glad he played, and I hope he continues to. But you kind of they're the little things that you can't get wrong. The first one, he should have left it. I think it was going out, but I can understand why he maybe was I'm not sure if it is. He feels really close. I don't know. But even then, he puts the ball down. It's still a scrum back,
Yeah, I think they said on comms. I didn't see it myself. No, but I think they said that he touched it before it got in goal, so he played it back into in goal himself.
I was about to say that. When it come off, I didn't think he did, but I guess he would have known if he did. So
absolutely, yeah. But again, and I think the second one led after the first one, and his mind was maybe just a little bit fried, and he kind of lost his thought pattern a little bit to make that mistake.
And these are the things, right? That's the difference between literally winning and losing, and it shows that everything matters, all the detail. There's no small things, right? All the attention to detail, and he can be super happy with a lot of what he did. And just these little things. And that's why England should have a fair bit of confidence going into next week, because, I mean, geez, France are unbelievable. And they're an absolute beast of a team. But England can beat them. If they, can just stop, if they just continue to play with that positivity and they play with a bit more optimism and they play for 80 minutes. God, these are easy things to say. But if they just play brilliantly and lose all the errors, they'll be fine.
They'll win every game.
I know.
But we talked a little bit about this earlier, like the fact that it just felt like Ireland's grip was just getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And every time England wriggled a little bit, like the grip got tighter again. And like Ireland then brought on their bench, people like Dan Sheehan had an incredible impact. He was amazing off the bench, like with his passing skills, his running skills. I thought he was outstanding. And that led to the Aki try, which we've already talked about. But just remember now, this is like 52 minutes and it's 10-10. So like the game kind of went away from England a little bit after that, but it was still really competitive at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Sheehan was arguably the best hooker in the world. I think he probably was best hooker in the world before he got injured. Having him to come back in is such a massive plus for them. And I think what happened in the second half is that the classic adage that attack is the best form of defence. England had defended so well, and they just kept defending. And it was like, we need to start playing and being a bit braver on the ball. And I know it's easier said than done, but we just couldn't get our attack going. And actually, and it gets tiring. Like, they tackled for a lot in the second half. I mean, having said that, at 10-all, the decision that gave Ireland the lead was wrong, in my opinion. Itoje barely touched him. And you can't give that a penalty. They've got a thing in American football now where they say, just let them compete. So there used to be loads of flags for kind of holding and foul, and they say just let people compete. And if they're in the air and there's danger, fine. But that, and also I love the new rule in the line out, by the way, of them. Is it a law? Sorry, it's not a rule. Where I got told that on Friday. I did some refereeing in a touch match, and I said, "What are the rules?" I said, "They're not the rules, they're the laws." I was like, "Sorry." Where if it's not straight but they don't compete, you still win it. Love that. Just play the game.
Quite a few times as well.
It did. Yeah, it happened in the Scotland game in particular. What a great rule. They're going to win it anyway. Anyway, but that they hadn't won it. That didn't influence him. It wasn't dangerous. I don't think he barely touched him. And we got the ball at 10-all, going with the ball. And then, so suddenly we've got the momentum. England have the momentum going into the half. And then that gets given. Now, I'm not saying that Ireland wouldn't have won, because I think they probably still would, because they were the best team. But you're like, the momentum shift in that moment. And I think Genge maybe got the ball off the back or somebody, and he was flying. He was going into their half. And not only that, we hadn't had the ball for a while. Yeah. England hadn't had the ball for a while. So you could suddenly think, you got that sense of, here we go. England can attack. And suddenly it turned, it's 13-10. And to me, that's a big moment. In the game, I said Ireland, better team, probably would have gone on to win, but those moments are huge, aren't they?
Yeah, really huge. And that was also off the back of the Slade penalty when he pushed over Hansen, which again, that was England's, just before that, they had a little bit of possession in Ireland's half, just briefly, and lost it with that penalty. Then tried to get the ball back, but lost it through the Itoje penalty. And then shortly after that, so it's 13-10 now, England got another good position, right in Ireland's, around about the 22, I think it was. And the line-out wasn't great for England, but they won this one cleanly. And then Curry dropped it cold in the midfield. And again, that's just a massive moment where it's still only 13-10. Although they'd soaked up all that pressure, they had a chance to go and really turn it round. And
they did. Yeah.
So disappointing.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I forgot about that one where he drops in the middle. But again, that's good pressure. Doris does a good tackle, I think. I thought he busted him, actually. But, that's... don't want to sound too negative, but
So I mean, and then the game kind of just went away from England. I mean, the try that really sort of confirmed it to take it to 2010, I thought was just a classic bit of injured Irish cleverness, just a little bit of ingenuity, hiding low in behind. I think it was Ty Byrne off the ruck, directly off the ruck. I don't think I've ever seen that play played like that before, and it worked an absolute treat for them.
Yeah, I think the kind of the subtlety of the deception around the fringes of, like, when you're in the defensive line, you're lining up, you can see who's there, you know you've got, and just a slight shift of somebody into the gap where, I mean, it seems so obvious. You've got three people lined up to defend. Suddenly one comes in from behind. If the defender can read it, great, but it's really hard, and he did go straight through. And, you know, Lowe's one of those players that, as an opposition fan, you hate him, but you'd love him to be on your team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, we talked about the Lions before, didn't we? About kind of who's. I think he's somebody that you think deserves to be on the Lions for sure. Yeah, and I thought, I mean, he was just a nuisance, and he's got this massive left foot on him as well. It kicks it so far, and he just impacts the game. For a left winger to impact the game that much is quite rare. So yeah, no, he's a great player.
Yeah, he's always in it, and absolutely always in the game. And that shortly afterwards, then the Sheehan try, which was I think it was his pass, wasn't it? That he passed out to Lowe initially. Lowe sort of got down the wing, passed back and started to Sheehan. And I've got to say, like, the way Sheehan scored it, I absolutely loved it. Like, because he sort of landed and then absolutely slammed the ball down over the line. That was really cool. Yeah, for the bonus point as well. Yeah,
I like that. It was cool. It was like, come on! It was like almost like a touchdown. The way he put it down, it was like, and you're like, oh, and you know what? It's just those moments of a team that good where they sense a bit of weakness, they could sense they're on top, and then they just push down the accelerator and they score again. So it's that classic thing of like, oh, I thought England were in the game here, and then they're just very quickly not. You know, the flip side is Scotland earlier in the game. They were playing well. They were ahead, and the thing that Gregor Towns would be disappointed with, they didn't put the accelerator down and finish them off when they had to. They really should have. Okay, they got the game won in the end, but they made it way more difficult than they should have. Credit to Italy, they're a good team, and so they did come back into it. But it's that ability of the top teams to recognise when you've got to put that accelerator down, or when you've got the ability to finish teams off, and that's what they did just so brilliantly.
Yeah, but England did come back and get 2 tries towards the end to get themselves a bonus point. But I think more importantly, actually, just to finish the game on top was quite important going into next week. To get some success from their attacking play, I think was quite important. Ollie Lawrence, again, we've talked about him a couple of times already. He was outstanding to put, I think it was Murley away down the left for Tom Curry's try. And then Theo Down stepped out, a nice little sort of bounce, and then passed to put Freeman in for a try. But I've got to say that Freeman try was a bad missed tackle by Robbie Henshaw. I think he'll look at that.
It was. However, it's a great example for me of, do you know, sometimes people are like, oh, there's no space, so we didn't go there. I'm like, yeah, but these players break tackles, so give them the ball. Like in international rugby, there often isn't space, but you've still got to play to it. You know what I mean? As a play to it, even if there isn't that much space, give it to the players who make breaks. And so you're right, Henshaw will be disappointed, but it's because Freeman's fast, and it's because he pulled away that Henshaw probably thought he was going to be here, and he was there, and so he just had to adjust, and he's just too powerful. So I think for England, I don't know. I've only watched the game once, but and they'll be watching it back a lot. But I just feel the sense in the second half of we're doing really well in defending, when actually you've got to go and win this game, you've got to go and attack. And that's where I hope they'll be at home. Yeah, it's France, so they're good. Very good. But there's something to work on for sure. It's not a missed opportunity because they gave 100%. It's not like all you can do is, you know, that's saying you don't want to die wondering. You don't want to worry about whether you haven't given everything, and they did. But there's more there. That's the exciting thing. There is more there for England. But just give the ball to people, and even if there isn't a huge amount of space, get them in the game, you know?
Yeah, and you're right. We mentioned it earlier. It's what they did do early in the game. And I just think they didn't quite have the opportunity. So when they did later in the second half in particular, we talked about it, the penalties, just dropping the balls out of nowhere. Tough. You don't get that many opportunities. And in the second half, England didn't really capitalise on them. But
it was a great test match. And I think, you know, it's funny. Knowing I was going to speak to you now, suddenly I have to watch it in a slightly different way, right? But it's like that all 3 games... there's a bit of theatre around it, and it's a real event. And I think the Six Nations is like, it's really kicked on. I think it's a real event. And so I loved it. I thought it was a great competition. Okay, they pulled away at the end, but actually it was a real contest for a long time. You could see there's a lot of respect between the players at the end. You could see that they appeared to kind of get on pretty well. So I think it's it bodes well for the rest of the tournament.
It does. And just thinking about England, I was disappointed with them during the autumn. I thought they'd sort of lost their way a little bit, but I'm excited again now. I think you can see what they're trying to do. You can see an intent to attack, and you can see a much more, what should I say, achievable defensive system, I think. So I'm excited again for England. Obviously disappointed they didn't get a win, but Ireland away in the first game was always going to be a tough ask. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think it is exciting, and roll on the rest of the tournament. Easy one next. France at home. Perfect. And actually Ireland as well, going to Scotland away is tough. So Scotland, at the start of the tournament, you've got Wales and Italy maybe who kind of are in this kind of second tier, which seems harsh. Well, it's not harsh, it's just the reality. But you've got 4 teams who could win it. And it's really hard. You've got Ireland and France who are probably favourites. But you've got Scotland and England who are good teams who are progressing too. So there's going to be some cracking matches, I think, coming up.
Absolutely. Okay, fantastic. Let's bring this to a close. That's what we think, folks. But what do you think? Any players we didn't mention that you thought were really played key factors in this game? I thought there were a lot of good performances overall, actually. It was a good game. Any key points that we didn't talk about that you want to ask questions about, let us have it in the comments down below. We'll join you there for a friendly conversation. Give the video a thumbs up while you're down there if you don't mind. It helps other people find it. So, Slem, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And people at home, you can subscribe there. You can watch that one next. And don't forget to get out and play.